"Sir, I'm sorry, but according to this signed deed, this ranch isn't yours anymore." Those words hit me like a punch to the gut as I stood on my own front porch, still clutching my suitcases, fresh off a 2-week vacation in Thailand. Jet-lagged and disoriented, I gaped at the man in the dusty suit, then at the strangers unpacking their lives in my ranch house. "What do you mean, not mine?" I stammered. "I'm Michael Whitaker. This is my land. I've lived here for 17 years. The man gave a slow nod, his voice calm but firm. "Yes, Mr. Whitaker, we're with the county office. A sale was processed while you were gone. The buyer presented a deed signed by your HOA president, Karen Mitchell." Karen Mitchell. My stomach lurched. Karen, the woman who once banged on my door because my horses smelled too natural during a breezy spring. The same Karen who demanded I repaint my red barn last Thanksgiving because it clashed with her beige aesthetic. And now she'd sold my ranch. I dropped my suitcase, my mind spinning. This has to be a mistake, a prank, something. But it wasn't. What I couldn't have known then, and what it took a full-blown investigation to uncover, was that Karen had forged my signature, conjured up a fake power of attorney, and sold my family's land to a developer itching to flatten it for a luxury golf course. The next morning, a court order arrived, demanding I vacate my own home. But let's hit pause and rewind so you can see how this insanity unfolded. Which city of the United States are you watching from? Drop a comment and share with us if you have any confrontation with an HOA. We will narrate your story on our channel. I'm Michael Whitaker, 52 years old ranch owner, former rodeo rider, and a proud Texas man. I've lived on this ranch since I was 35, built every inch of it with my own hands. My late wife Alice and I raised our son here. After she passed 5 years ago, this land became everything to me. Next up, we have Karen Mitchell, HOA president, early 60s, drives a pearl white SUV with the license plate Love, HOA. She moved into the neighborhood 5 years ago and treated the HOA like her personal kingdom. She once fined a teenager $150 for skateboarding to joyfully past her driveway. Then there's Travis Mitchell, Karen's adult son, who still lives with her. Mid-30s, thinks he's better than everyone because he went to law school for 1 semester. He wears Bluetooth earpieces even when he's not on the phone. And finally, we've got Sheriff Doyle. Big guy, slow talker, but fair. He's known me for over 2 decades. He doesn't like HOA drama, says it's like a reality show with no prize money. Back to the story. 3 weeks ago, I booked a trip to Thailand. I needed a break. My doctor had warned me. I was stressed, my blood pressure was climbing, and since I had no animals breeding season, no urgent work, I figured why not 2 weeks of rest, elephants, temples, and good food before I left. I let Karen know it was neighborly to do so, even though I didn't trust her. She gave me one of her fake smiles, nodded, and said, "Safe travels, Michael. I'll make sure the HOA watches over your property." Now I realize what she meant was perfect timing, time to steal everything you've ever worked for. While I was gone, Karen filed paperwork claiming I had given her the right to act on my behalf. She forged a power of attorney document and backdated it. Then she listed the ranch for sale privately to a developer out of Austin, and somehow, I still don't know how she made it look legal enough for the papers to pass. That explains the look on the face of the new couple living in my house, a husband and wife named Brandon and Melissa. They genuinely believe they bought the ranch fair and square. I didn't blame them, I blamed her. I stormed down to the HOA office, which Karen insisted we call the administrative cottage, even though it was just a glorified shed near the community pool. She wasn't there. Instead, I found Travis sitting behind the desk. "Travis," I said, barely keeping my voice steady, "where's your mom?" He looked up slowly, his Bluetooth blinking like a warning light. "She's not available, Mr. Whitaker." "Did she sell my ranch?" He shrugged. "I think you should speak to a lawyer." My fists clenched. "You're going to regret this." And then Travis made the mistake that shifted this from neighborhood drama to criminal scandal. He smirked and said, "Maybe next time, don't leave your doors wide open, cowboy." What he didn't know, and what I remembered right then, was that I had installed trail cameras all over my property, motion sensors, cloud backup every time someone walked up to my barn or stepped onto my porch or opened a gate. It got recorded and sent to my account. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and began reviewing the footage. Sure enough, there it was, 3 days after I left. Karen walking into my office, rifling through my file cabinet. 2 days later, Travis walking out with a briefcase. I had video proof. Still, the court order stood. I had to vacate the house, at least temporarily, while ownership was under review. I had 48 hours. I packed what I could: my late wife's locket, my son's childhood saddle, a few clothes, and I moved into the horse trailer behind the barn. That's when the sheriff came. Sheriff Doyle stood outside the trailer while I boiled water over a camp stove. "Mike," he said, adjusting his belt, "you need to stay calm. We're going to look into this." "All right, calm," I scoffed. "They stole my land. What do I look like, a monk?" He sighed. "You got anything that proves what happened?" I handed him the flash drive with the camera footage. His eyes narrowed. "Well, now this might just change everything." But just as we were talking, a black SUV screeched into the driveway. Karen jumped out, holding a clipboard, and marched straight toward us, like she owned the world. "You're trespassing, Michael," she yelled. "This is no longer your property. You need to leave immediately before I call the police." Sheriff Doyle looked at her, then looked at me. I didn't move. "I am the police," Doyle said slowly, turning to face her. And that's when Karen did something I never thought she would. She lunged at me with her clipboard and screamed, "You're ruining everything." Sheriff Doyle stepped between us, grabbing her wrist. Mid-swing, "Karen Mitchell," he said, voice suddenly very calm, "you're under investigation for fraud, forgery, and trespassing. You have the right to remain silent." And just like that, Karen bolted. She turned and sprinted back toward her SUV like a cartoon character, knocking over flower pots and screaming nonsense. "Do not let her drive," Doyle shouted into his radio. "Suspect fleeing." The whole scene exploded into chaos. Sirens, shouting neighbors peeking out from behind their curtains, and me just standing there, stunned, because the woman who tried to steal my life was now running from the law. But what I didn't know was that this wasn't the end, not even close. In fact, what I was about to find out next would shake me to my core. The sirens wailed louder as Karen's SUV fishtailed down the gravel driveway, kicking up a cloud of dust that swallowed the mailbox. Sheriff Doyle's deputy, who'd arrived just moments earlier, tore after her in his patrol, car lights flashing. I stood, frozen still, gripping the flash drive, my brain struggling to keep up with what had just happened. She really ran. I muttered more to myself than to anyone else. Sheriff Doyle rubbed his jaw. "Yep, guilty people run, and run she did, Karen Mitchell. HOA president, queen of petty complaints and phony citations, was now a fugitive." I followed. Doyle back to his cruiser, where he radioed in a full APB. White SUV, license plate love, HOA suspect, fled scene of investigation, possible forged, real estate documents, false claims of ownership, might be headed to her son's house. When he hung up, he looked at me. "You sure you're all right, Mike?" "All right," I laughed. But it wasn't a happy one. I just got evicted from my own ranch. My house was sold behind my back, and the woman responsible is now in a high-speed chase down County Road 8. "No, Doyle, I'm not all right." He nodded slowly. "I hear you, but we're going to fix this first. We need to get every shred of evidence you've got." I spent the next few hours digging through my emails, security footage, bank statements, and HOA correspondence. I even found a scanned copy of the original deed from years ago with my signature, clear as day, not the shaky forgery Karen used to pull off the sale by nightfall. I was exhausted. I couldn't stay in the house, not legally, not yet, so I slept in the horse trailer again with my old dog Rusty curled at my feet. The next morning, the real estate developer who bought my property showed up with a construction crew. That's when things got worse. A man in a sleek suit about my age stepped out of a black truck and walked straight toward me like he owned the place. "Mr. Whitaker?" he asked. "I'm Grant Dalton. I'm the one who bought the ranch from the HOA. I have my legal team with me. We're here to do a site inspection before development begins." I stared at him. "You're not setting one boot on this land." He frowned. "Sir, I have documents. You were scammed." I snapped. "Karen Mitchell didn't own this ranch." "I did, still do. And she's now running from the police that threw him off his confidant." Smile disappeared. "My legal team verified the documents with county records." "Well, those documents were forged. Sheriff's investigating. Good luck explaining that to your investors." Dalton looked nervous now. He turned and walked briskly back to his truck. While making a call a few minutes later, the crew packed up and drove off. But that wasn't the end of it. Later that afternoon, I got a call from a woman named Lindsay Marks, a junior clerk at the county land office. She sounded shaken. "I shouldn't be calling," she whispered, "but I saw something strange last week." I leaned closer to the phone. "What kind of strange?" "Feel." "A woman came in with some paperwork, said she was acting as power of attorney for a Michael Whitaker." "That's you, right?" "Yep." "She had a notarized form and a signed sale agreement, but something felt off." I tried to flag it to my manager, but she brushed it off. "I've been thinking about it ever since my heart beat faster." "Can you testify?" She paused. "If it comes to that, yes." I kept a copy of the original document she brought in. "I can send it anonymously." True to her word, the next morning a brown envelope was slipped under the trailer door. Inside was the form Karen used, and the signature was clearly not mine. Things were beginning to shift in my favor, but just when I thought the storm might start clearing, a new one hit. A black SUV was found abandoned on the edge of Lake Conroe. Karen's SUV, but no Karen, no fingerprints, no license. Next to the vehicle, squinting at the water. "We don't know if she ran or if she staged something." I folded my arms. "So what now?" "She just disappears." Doyle looked at me. "We'll find her, Mike, but in the meantime, you might want to keep your head down. If she faked a power of attorney, it means she had help." I didn't sleep that night, because he was right. Karen couldn't have pulled this off alone. Not the documents, not the sale, not the property transfers. And that meant someone else, maybe more than one person, had been involved from the start. I started thinking about who had access to my files, who knew I was going to Thailand, who had a reason to take me down. That's when it hit me. Travis, Karen's son, the guy who was sitting in the HOA office. That day acting smug, the guy who wore a Bluetooth headset, like he was running a tech company from his mom's laundry room. I rushed to my old barn and dug out a storage box I hadn't opened in years. It held all the old HOA meeting recordings I used to archive. Every single HOA board meeting was legally required to be recorded. Karen insisted on it for transparency. pH levels and lawn heights. But then jackpot, 3 months ago. Karen had called a special session of the HOA board. On the recording, I could hear her whispering to Travis, before the others arrived. Once he leaves for vacation, she said, we'll file everything. You just need to pretend you're reviewing the deed paperwork. We've already got the notary lined up. And I hit pause. The whole thing had been premeditated. The only reason I had any chance of winning was because Karen got greedy and sloppy. I emailed the audio file straight to Sheriff Doyle. An hour later, my phone rang. You might want to come down to the station. He said, we've just picked someone up. You'll want to see this. I drove straight there. When I stepped into the holding area, I froze, sitting behind the glass, wearing a wrinkled button D-down and looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. Travis caught eye, walked up to the glass. He wouldn't look me in the eye. You think you're smart, Travis? I asked. He mumbled it was her idea, but just before I could respond, an officer rushed into the room. Sheriff, you need to come quick. We just got a hit on Karen's credit card. Doyle stood up, where the officer hesitated. New Mexico motel, just outside Albuquerque. She used it to book 2 nights under the name Lori King. And she's not alone. I narrowed my eyes. Not alone. The officer nodded. She's with someone named, he checked his notepad, Grant Dalton. My jaw dropped. Grant Dalton, the developer. He wasn't just a victim. He was in on it. The sale wasn't an accident. It was an inside job from the start. And now they were both on the run. I stood there in the sheriff's station, completely stunned. Karen Mitchell and Grant Dalton. Now, he said, Dalton never questioned the forged documents. He pushed for permits faster than usual. The sale price way below market. They were in this together, and now they're both in New Mexico, I added, trying to control my breathing. The deputy nodded. We've already notified Albuquerque PD and the FBI, but we don't know how long they'll stay there. I felt something heavy settle in my chest. This wasn't just some petty HOA revenge anymore. This was full-on real estate fraud, conspiracy, multi-state crime, and my life, my home, was the battlefield. Doyle turned to me. Listen, Mike, I'm going to need you to stay close, just in case they try to disappear again. I nodded. I'm not going anywhere, but truth be told, I was running on fumes. The last few days had been nothing but chaos. First, fake real estate deals, and a neighborhood gossip queen turned criminal mastermind. So that night, I went to the only place that brought me comfort. The stable, Rusty, followed me as I walked into the dimly lit barn where my 2 horses, Buck and Shadow, stood quietly. I brushed them both in silence, my mind spinning. I thought about Alice and my late wife, and how she always said I didn't sleep much. But early the next morning, I got a surprise. A black sedan pulled up outside the barn. A tall woman stepped out, smart suit badge clipped to her belt. She introduced herself as Agent Nina Colby with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. She shook my hand firmly. Mr. Whitaker, we believe Karen Mitchell and Grant Dalton have committed federal crimes, wire fraud, real estate fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. We've been monitoring Dalton for a while. Your case might be what finally brings him down. Hearing that made my heart pound. But she continued, we need more, something that connects Dalton to the fraudulent documents directly, right? Now it's circumstantial. I thought for a moment. Then I remembered something too. Weeks before I left for Thailand, I saw Karen and Dalton having lunch at the local golf club. Odd considering. Karen always said developers were ruining the community spirit. I didn't think anything of it then, but now it could be proof of collusion. I can find out more, I told her. Let me do some digging. Agent Colby smiled. We'll be in touch. Just be careful. Later that day. Forever, Janice, I said, leaning on the counter. You got records of guests who've eaten here in the last few months. She raised an eyebrow. You think? Around May 2nd, she tapped a few keys. Yep, booked a private dining room 2-hour reservation. They came in at 12:30, ordered lunch, coffee, and whoa, signed a guest contract for property consultation. My heart nearly exploded. Can I get a copy? She grinned. For you, Mike. Always with that copy in hand. I rushed straight back to the sheriff's office. Doyle whistled as he read it. Well, look at that. A signed consultation document between Karen and Dalton, dated 2 weeks before you left town. That's all we needed. Agent Colby arrived that evening, and after reviewing the new evidence, she gave the green light. Arrest warrants were signed, and all points bulletin was issued nationwide. But just as things seemed to be turning around, it happened. I returned to my trailer that night to find the door wide open. Rusty growled low as I stepped inside. The place had been ransacked. My flash drive's laptop, and even my backup hard drive, all gone. Someone had broken in. I immediately called the sheriff. Don't touch anything, he warned. We'll send a team right over. As I stepped back outside, I noticed tire tracks, deep ones, leading away from the trailer. Whoever came had been in a hurry, and worse, they knew exactly what to look for. Who else would know? I kept backups, only a few people, and one of them was Travis. But he was in custody, or so I thought. Sheriff Doyle called a few hours later. Mike, you're not going to believe this. Try me. Travis was bailed out. Cash bail, no name, no ID. My grip on the phone tightened. He's gone now. We had 3 people on the run: Karen, Dalton, and Travis. And that meant one thing. The plan wasn't just to steal my ranch. They were coming back to finish what they started. I didn't know how, I didn't know when, but something big was coming, and I wasn't going to wait around to be a victim again. The war for my land and my name had just begun. It was just past midnight when I heard Rusty bark like I'd never heard him bark before. Sharp, panicked, and deep. I grabbed my flashlight and the old hunting rifle from under the cat. Someone was out there. I slipped out the trailer's back door and crouched behind the firewood. Across the edge of my field, moving fast toward the barn. They didn't know I had eyes on them. I aimed the flashlight, clicked it on, and shouted. The figures froze, then bolted. I didn't chase them, not into the dark. I wasn't stupid, but I did fire a warning shot into the air that got their attention. Car doors slammed, an engine roared, a beat-up SUV tore down the dirt road, barely making the curve near the old fence post. 5 minutes later, the sheriff's truck came rolling in with lights off. Doyle stepped out and looked around. They came back. I told him, breath ragged, I think it was Karen and Dalton. He checked the tire tracks, same treads as the ones at your trailer. They're circling you, Mike. Why? What are they trying to get? Doyle didn't answer right away. He looked toward the barn, then back at me. You said you backed up everything, right? Yeah, except I still have the originals in the barn. I nodded slowly. They know that Doyle muttered. They're trying to erase every trace of what they did. This isn't just fraud anymore. Mike, they're desperate, and desperate people were dangerous. The next morning, I met again with Agent Colby. She looked visibly frustrated. Albuquerque PD searched the motel, she said. Flipping through a file room was clean. Security cameras show Karen and Dalton leaving the premises 4 hours before we got there. And Travis, she shook her head. No trace, we think. They've split up now. They're covering tracks, ditching vehicles, using burner phones. This has gone deeper than we ever expected. My ranch had turned into a war zone. My name was in legal limbo. My life, which used to be all about early sunrises and fixing fences, had become a nationwide manhunt. But then a break. Agent Colby called later that day with news that lit a fire in me. We found a safety deposit box in Karen Mitchell's name, opened under a fake business. Prairie Crest Solutions. What's in it? Hard to say, but we're getting a warrant to open it. Our informant says it may hold forged documents, including multiple power of attorney forms. I clenched my fist. That could be everything. We hope so. If that box holds evidence of more victims, this might be bigger than just you. It felt strange knowing this wasn't personal anymore. It was criminal enterprise. A scam ring using the HOA system to target widows, veterans, and absentee homeowners. I was just the one who fought back, but I wasn't out of the woods yet. That afternoon, as I returned from town, I noticed something strange. The ranch gate, which I'd locked myself that morning and was wide open. I pulled over and stepped out slowly. Then I saw it spray painted in red across the side of my barn. Stay quiet or stay gone. I felt the air rush out of my lungs. This was no longer about money. It was a threat. I backed away and called the sheriff. Immediately, within the hour, a forensic team arrived and began dusting the barn for prints. Sheriff Doyle kept his tone calm, but I saw the look in his eyes. They're trying to scare you, he said. They want you to run, but you and I both know that's not who you are. I'm not going anywhere. Good. He nodded. Because we just got that safety deposit box warrant, and we're opening it in the morning. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up with the lights on, Rusty by my side, shotgun within reach. I kept replaying everything: Karen's smug face, Travis's Bluetooth arrogance, Dalton's fake charm. This wasn't just about reclaiming my ranch anymore. This was about every person they had scammed before me, and the ones they'd scam if I didn't stop them. At 8 o'clock, 8 a.m. sharp, I met Agent Colby and the sheriff outside the Citibank. We entered a secure room and waited as a clerk opened the thick steel deposit box vault. When the box was pulled from the wall and opened, we all leaned in. Inside were dozens of neatly stacked folders, each labeled with a different name and property title, but one stood out. It was marked in bold red ink, Whitaker Emergency Copy. Agent Colby opened it and gasped. Inside was a full forged power of attorney document, along with a fake will claiming I had transferred ownership of the ranch to Karen in gratitude for HOA service. Sheriff Doyle nearly laughed. Well, that's creative, he muttered, but there was more. Taped to the back of the folder was a USB drive. We plugged it into a secure laptop on site. Inside were files, signed forms, communications between Dalton and Karen, emails, bank transfers, even voice memos where they discussed removing obstacles, and one audio recording made my blood run cold. Karen's voice, scratchy and angry. If he doesn't drop it, we make him drop it. One way or another, people vanish all the time in Texas. Agent Colby sat back slowly. That's enough to indict all three of them. Conspiracy, fraud, and now possible threats to life. Doyle leaned over the table. We're not just going to arrest them, we're going to bury them in federal charges. But just as we were preparing to move forward, Agent Kolb's phone buzzed. She picked up, listened, and her eyes widened. Then she looked at me. They'd been spotted. Where she paused, then said, "The last thing I expected. Your ranch right now." I shot to my feet. What, Karen and Dalton? They're back, breaking into the barn. Doyle was already on his radio. "All units respond. Suspects on Whitaker property. Possible armed confrontation." I didn't wait. I ran, jumped in my truck, and tore out of the parking lot like the road was on fire as I sped down the country highway, wind roaring through the window, heart thudding against my chest. One thought hit me: they weren't trying to hide anymore. They were coming to destroy the last of the evidence, and if I was in their way, they'd come for me to buy the time. I turned off the highway onto the dusty road leading to my ranch. I could already see the flashing lights bouncing across the treetops. Sirens wailed behind me as 3 patrol vehicles sped up the trail from town, but I didn't slow down. I knew what Karen and Dalton were after: the originals, the last physical evidence I hadn't digitized, still tucked in a fireproof box beneath the floorboards of the barn's old tack room. If they got to it before the sheriff did, this entire case could collapse. I swerved around the gatepost tires, skidding over loose gravel, and slammed to a stop just short of the main barn. Rusty barked wildly from his chain-link kennel tail between his legs. The horses inside were restless, stomping, snorting, panicking. And then I saw them: Karen and Grant inside the barn. Karen was tugging at the floorboards with a crowbar, her face red with rage. Grant was holding a jerry can gasoline. They weren't just trying to steal evidence. They were going to burn it. I didn't even think. I jumped out, rifle in hand, and shouted, "Drop it, both of you, step away from the floor." They froze. Karen slowly turned, her eyes wild. You don't get it, do you? We earned this. You sat on this land like some king. You don't deserve it." Grant raised both hands. "It's too late, Whitaker. We've already won." "No," I said through clenched teeth. "You lost the moment you got greedy." Suddenly, Karen lunged for the matches in her pocket, but before she could strike them, Sheriff Doyle tackled her from behind. She screamed, flailing wildly, but Doyle wrestled the crowbar from her hand and shoved her face down into the dirt. "Karen Mitchell," he panted, "you are officially under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted arson, forgery, and unlawful property." Transferred deputies rushed in behind him. 2 of them pinned Grant to the side of the stall, while another read him his rights. I lowered my rifle slowly, chest heaving, hands shaking. It was over. They were caught. But even as they were dragged to the cruisers, I could still hear Karen yelling, "This isn't the end, Whitaker. You think you've won? I made this neighborhood. I was the HOA." I wanted to say something clever, something final, but I just watched her get stuffed into the back seat like a storm that finally ran out of wind. As the cruisers pulled away, Doyle walked back over to me. "You all right?" "Better now," I said, exhaling hard. "What about Travis?" Doyle nodded. "Already picked up outside Amarillo. He flipped as soon as we got him. Gave us bank records, email chains, everything. Even admitted he forged your signature and the ranch." I asked. The ownership agent, Colby, stepped out from one of the backup vehicles. "Just arriving. We filed an emergency injunction, titles being restored. The county is also opening a full investigation into the HOA's finances. And you'll be getting restitution." I blinked. Restitution, she nodded, from Dalton Shell Companies, and we're seizing Karen's assets. If the court rules in your favor, you'll get back every cent and more. I looked out at my land. The sun was rising behind the hills. The barn was still standing. My horses were safe. Rusty had stopped barking and was now leaning into my leg for comfort, but something inside me knew this story wasn't just about my ranch anymore. It was about what happens when good people stand their ground, when they refuse to be pushed off what they've built. 2 days later, the news spread like wildfire. HOA president arrested for massive land fraud scheme. Karen's mugshot was on every local channel. Grant's company stock tanked. Overnight, Travis's smirk was finally gone. The neighborhood changed to for the first time in years. People spoke freely. HOA members resigned en masse. A town meeting was held in my front pasture, where I was unanimously voted in as the new community liaison. Funny how that works. 1 minute, you're being evicted, the next, you're leading the neighborhood. But just when I thought peace had returned to the ranch, a letter arrived. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a single piece of paper, scrawled in red ink. This isn't over. I stared at the letter for a long time. No envelope, no fingerprints, just a single sheet of paper with those 4 chilling words. This isn't over. Rusty sat at my feet, tail still, ears perked. He could feel the tension vibrating off me like heat. I handed the note over to Sheriff Doyle, who took it with a grim face. It's her handwriting, he muttered. I'd recognize it anywhere, but how? I asked. She's in county lockup, no bail, no contact. She may have slipped it to someone during processing, or maybe someone still helping her on the outside. The thought made my stomach tighten. I had just started breathing again, just started believing it was all behind me. Agent Colby launched a new angle of the investigation right then, tracking anyone in the jail system who had received visits from Karen or Grant. Meanwhile, I did what I always do when things get messy. I went to work. The barn needed repair. Fencing had been kicked in. My tack room had been ransacked. But the land was still mine, and I was going to rebuild, not just for me, but for every neighbor who had been silenced by Karen's reign over the HOA. Within a week, things had settled, or so I thought. Then one afternoon just before sunset, I heard tires crunching up the gravel road. I stepped out of the barn, expecting Doyle, or maybe Agent Colby. Instead, it was someone I didn't recognize. A clean-cut man in a gray suit stepped out of a sleek sedan. He carried a briefcase and wore expensive sunglasses despite the fading sun. Mr. Whitaker, he said smoothly, I'm here on behalf of Westman Enterprises. I squinted. Who? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. A holding company, one of many that had contracts pending with Mr. Dalton before the incident. I'm afraid we're here to enforce a clause that still exists in your title. I folded my arms. There's no clause. That title transfer was invalid. He pulled a document from his briefcase. Actually, this is a water rights agreement signed years ago by a previous owner, but buried in the language is a stipulation that if the land is ever abandoned or transferred, a claim can be made by the enterprise holding secondary interest. You've got to be kidding me. He didn't blink. We're simply executing a legal right. Doyle and Colby arrived 10 minutes later. They read over the document. Her face turned pale. He's not wrong, Colby said slowly. If this clause holds, they could stall your title restoration for months, maybe years. So what now? I asked. We go to court, but we'll need a witness, someone from Dalton's office, someone who knew what he was doing with these shell companies. I looked at Doyle. He nodded. Travis, he was still in protective custody, now more cooperative after realizing his mom had used him like a pawn. We brought him in the next morning. He looked tired, unshaven, not smug anymore, just hollow. "You want my help?" he asked. "Fine, but I want a deal." Colby crossed her arms. "You'll get a lighter sentence if you testify. No guarantees. Beyond that," he sighed, "Dalton set up those companies years ago. He used HOA leaders like Mom to target properties ones where owners were absent or aging. The water rights clause, that was just a trick, a trap. And yeah, your name was on the list." He passed us a folder with internal memos, financial projections, and lists of targeted homeowners, many of them in my county. When I saw the name of my old neighbor, Mr. Calvin Wood, who passed away 3 months ago, my blood boiled. They were planning to take his place. To Travis nodded. "It's bigger than you think." We submitted everything to the court. The judge issued an emergency injunction on the Westmont claim and ordered a full investigation into every holding company tied to Grant Dalton. But the war wasn't over yet. That night, I received another note. This time, it was on the windshield of my truck, typed, no handwriting, just 6 words: "Tell Travis to stay quiet." Now I looked around the yard. No one in sight. The barn was dark. My dog was silent. But someone had been here again. I called Colby immediately. She sent a federal marshal to stay at the ranch overnight. "They're watching," she said. I didn't sleep that night. Again, in the morning, Travis was moved to an undisclosed safe house, and I went back to work. The sun still rose, my horses still needed feeding, but I knew this wouldn't end until every last root of this scheme was torn out of the ground. 2 days later, we got word from the FBI. A federal grand jury had issued indictments, not just for Karen Dalton and Travis, but 12 others across the country, people who were running the same scam in other states, other HOS, other neighborhoods. The whole house of cards was falling, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still close, watching, waiting. I told myself maybe I was just being paranoid, until that evening, and when Rusty didn't come when I called. I found him near the barn, whimpering. A red ribbon was tied around his collar and tucked beneath it. A final message. The words echoed in my head like a thunderclap. "Chapter 7 will be your last." I stood there, one hand clenched around the note, the other resting gently on Rusty's back as he whimpered under my touch. The red ribbon tied to his collar wasn't just a thread, it was a signature. Karen's favorite color. She had always worn a red scarf during HOA meetings, said it commanded respect. Now it was her warning. I wasted no time. I rushed inside, locked every door, and called Sheriff Doyle and Agent Colby. Within the hour, the ranch was crawling with law enforcement. "This ain't just about scaring you anymore," Doyle said, scanning the tree-line with a tactical flashlight. "This is personal." Colby agreed. "They're trying to silence you, maybe. Travis too, but how?" I asked. "Karen and Dalton are behind bars." Colby gave me a tight look. "Correction. They were." "What do you mean were?" I asked, feeling the air thicken. She took a deep breath. "Karen posted bail under a different alias, with money wired through an offshore account. The bond company was unaware of the alias until it was too late. She vanished 2 nights ago." My throat dried instantly. "And Dalton transferred to a federal holding facility," she replied. "But word is, someone tried to intercept the van. The agents held them off. But it tells us one thing. There's a network behind all of this, and it hasn't been dismantled." Yet I had known Karen was petty. I didn't know she was dangerous. The next morning, I made the hardest decision. I've ever had to make. I stood on my porch, looked across the land I had built with my bare hands, and handed over the keys. I'm leaving the ranch for a while, I told Colby. Let the feds monitor it, put surveillance in place, use it as bait. If you have to, she nodded. Smart, they'll come back. I packed a duffel, loaded up Rusty, and drove off quietly. No lights, no fuss. They wouldn't get me, not now. But it didn't stop there. While staying with a friend in a nearby county, I got a call from Travis's handler. He's gone, the agent said. Vanished during a decoy move. We don't know if he ran or was taken. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. My heart had sunk into my stomach. Travis, for all his flaws, was the linchpin in this whole case. Without his testimony, everything could fall apart that night. I sat alone in a borrowed cabin in the woods, sipping lukewarm coffee and staring out the window. I thought of Alice, my late wife. She used to say, "Justice only works if someone stays standing long enough to see it through." I wasn't going to fall. Then a miracle, a deputy named Harris, stationed out near the state line, recognized a license plate from the Bolo, a black sedan tied to Travis's disappearance. A chase ensued. The vehicle crashed into a ditch. They found Travis inside, alive, bruised, terrified, with zip ties around his wrists, and in the trunk fake IDs, burner phones, blueprints of my ranch. This was more than revenge. It was a hit, a takedown of every witness, every whistleblower. Travis was taken to a federal facility with maximum protection. Colby doubled the detail on the ranch. And then we got the final piece of the puzzle, an email from Dalton's own account, recovered after months of digging, a digital confession, a full layout of the scam, how HOA position gave them leverage, how they tricked the system, and how many people they planned to take down. That email went straight to the U.S. Attorney. Within 48 hours, federal charges were announced on live television: fraud, conspiracy, racketeering, attempted arson, witness intimidation. It was over. Karen was arrested at a roadside diner 2 states away, trying to dye her hair in a gas station bathroom. Grant Dalton, caught trying to board a private jet out of Nevada, and the others rounded up one by one as the FBI dismantled the entire operation. The ranch restored to my name, the HOA disbanded by a court order, and the neighborhood free. I returned home a week later. It felt different, quieter, more sacred. I rebuilt the barn doors, painted over the hateful words, restored every inch of what they tried to destroy. Rusty sat beside me on the porch as the sun dipped low over the hills. The wind carried the smell of earth, hay, and peace. For the first time in months, I breathed easy, because sometimes the bad guys don't get away. Sometimes justice does catch up, and sometimes the ranch wins.